Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the podcast that shares ideas on how to upgrade your lead generation. Here is your host, Glenn Schmeltzley.
Thanks for listening to Funnel Reboot, where we explore how you can improve your lead generation. What you're listening to is part of a series on how to structure a growth team, in particular, those marketing resources that generate sales leads for a company. Now, each resourcing model along this in-house to outsource spectrum was covered in the 4-part series. Each guest gave their take from their perspective. Now, their views are here in these episodes. As well, they're in a webinar that was hosted by the agency behind this podcast. To hear the full panel's answer on which in-house or outsourced model is right for your company, go to the agency's website, marketingwhatsnew.com, and watch the recording. It's ungated, and the link is in the show notes. This episode's perspective is from the principal of an agency that does PPC marketing. And as you hear him, I'd like you to pay close attention to how outsourced staff who work at an agency are all specialists, as opposed to marketing generalists that would work in-house, and also hear the economic advantage of paying an agency for these specialists on an as-needed basis. Hear the talent hiring challenge that is faced by agencies and employers alike, and how the type of client projects that an agency can bring on helps them with staff retention. Listen to the kind of leaders within a client organization that an agency really hopes they get to work with, and how an honest dialogue between both sides on what is or isn't working makes for a great agency-client relationship. Here are the limits on how much an agency is willing to go to learn about your industry environment and mirror your culture, and how far they're willing to go to be tied to performance-related metrics that actually lead to revenue on your part. So let's go hear this agency leader introduce himself and get his take on outsourcing.
Hey there, I'm Nathan Pabich.
Good to see you, Nathan. And you're in Chicago today, right?
Yep, I work in Chicago.
Excellent. Well, I hope everything is going all right there. I know that you, like we were recording in early 2020, and we've got lockdowns. So it's good for us to have this conversation because we're not doing much else.
Yeah, exactly.
So the topic that we're delving into, Nathan, is all about the way that people can assemble a marketing function. And they've got a lot of choices. And one of the choices is to use an agency. And I wanted you on because I know that you have a lot of experience in agencies. And maybe you could start me off by telling me what you wish companies that use agencies could understand about agencies.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's really the scope of work for which an agency is hired. And I think understanding the limits there, and while I think any agency is going to want to help, but really what they can do and do well is going to drastically be impacted by on the one hand scope of work, but then also scope of the talent on the contracted team.
Gotcha. So they do have to do some upfront thinking and work. It's not like you guys just come in and wave a magic wand.
Yeah, unfortunately not. I mean, I think there's a lot we can do and a lot we can do to help guide a marketing process. But really, we need a core marketing plan from the company we partner with.
Sure.
Right? We need the vision at least, whereas we can see and understand how to map that well to the channels and best get their message across.
Right. So, and there are different kinds of agencies. So level set for me by telling me about your agency, Digital Third Coast, and what kind it is, and maybe just some things about size or kind of clients you work with.
Yeah, so we focus on the SMB market, primarily in Chicago, though we do have clients nationwide. We work with a handful of, Fortune 500 clients as well. We've always been generalists, meaning we'll work with any company across vertical. However, we are a boutique in that we focus primarily on SEO, search engine optimization, and paid media. So that can range from anything from your Google ads, your remarketing efforts, your display, or your Facebook.
Okay, so that's search and social sides of paid.
Yeah, exactly. But we don't do anything with email. We don't do organic social, right? We're just not equipped, with the staff, with the expertise on those sides of things. So we really like to play in the sandbox that we know well.
Sure. So you've highlighted some things that other agencies do. What would be some other times where another agency is in the picture? Maybe you're working in tandem with them,
Yeah,
or a company decides to go with a completely different kind of agency, like the full service integrated agency.
sure.
Like, tell me
Yeah.
what they do.
Well, yeah, I think there's so many options out there, and and that evolved for a reason, right? There are right fits for different scenarios, right? There's no way that we can cater to absolutely every possible audience and help every company reach their goals. So yeah, on the one hand, you have integrated agencies, which would be they're going to handle your marketing strategy all the way from website design to creative execution and potentially out of home marketing, et cetera, et cetera. The best parts about that is you're going to have a project manager who's kind of overseeing that whole plan all the way through across these disparate teams, right? Which means you have one point of contact often in that type of agency scenario. Whereas when you work with a smaller agency like us, who are specialists, you're actually working hand in hand with the experts, right? So you are in touch with the people actually pulling the levers on the marketing. So I
Gotcha.
think there's pros and cons with both sides of that.
Yeah, so they should forget about older models where they thought of a single place that kind of came up from the inception of the strategy to executing all the media channels. We're now in a world more where you need to figure out which agency you need because of the piece that you need, right?
Well, sure, yeah, and which sides are handled best in house, right? So, from my experience, something like organic social, where it's wrangling your existing audience, it is probably best done in house rather than outsourced, right? Because the people inside the company are going to have the best grasp of what those existing customers truly need, what they value, what should be communicated. And I just don't think often an outside partner is going to do that as well as someone who lives and breathes the company day to day.
Right. So they need to look at things and consider some of them core, and those
Sure.
things will clearly be in house, and then they can use an agency to leverage them. Right. Like maybe
Oh,
taking
absolutely.
that social and then amplifying it with paid, but
Mhm.
the actual content itself came from inside.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I think you can definitely find execution partners to leverage and amplify what you're doing and to do so more efficiently. But I think that core marketing message is really best developed inside that company.
Cool. How would you describe, so when it has to cross that threshold, right? Like literally, if we imagine you're throwing it over the cubicle wall from
Hmm.
a client to an agency, that's where you're going to notice things like work styles, right? And so companies now, we're clearly feeling the influence of agile and different, internal teams. They may have scrums and stand-ups where they kind of figure out when it comes to them working with an agency on the outside, what should they be prepared for? Because you guys probably have your own style of how you're doing things. And how do those two mesh together?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's something that needs to work itself out or be addressed really early on in a relationship. We at our agency at least we kind of can take a custom approach, right, and we can adapt to a client's work style and their workflow. But I think it is really key to just be upfront and communicate what's needed, and then search for those efficiencies together. And that's to the client's advantage oftentimes, because the less an agency is spinning their wheels on the administration of these things means more and more time can go into the creative aspects or the execution, or just ensuring everything is working according to plan, rather than just facilitating
Gotcha. And is that something that you guys have a separate role for? Like, do you have an account executive or account relations person that, holds on to that relationship and make sure that while the client isn't going to talk with everybody inside your agency, they are going to get to talk with somebody to get all that communication straight?
Yeah, we at Digital Third Coast, we take, I think, a different approach versus most agencies where the end client actually works with the end expert. Meaning,
Right.
if you're a marketing manager and you hire Digital Third Coast to do SEO and paid media, let's say I'm on the account, you're going to work directly with me on the paid media side and then directly with one of our SEO AMs on the SEO side. And yeah, I think we come together often because there is, of course, complementary aspects to these things, but often our workflows and what we're actually doing is pretty divergent, right?
Gotcha.
So we're going to need separate feedback outside of the bigger picture idea and outside of the coming together for reporting and evaluation.
I'd love if you could give me any insight into why you guys decided to go with that model. That's a really interesting way. It requires the client to maybe spend a little bit more time because they might have something that touches on both. So they might have to have, a conversation with both of your experts.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear what you guys think is good about that model.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been a pain point. I don't think any model or any system of working this is going to be a catch-all and perfect for everyone, right? So I'll just say that right off the bat. And to be perfectly frank, when Digital Third Coast was started, 13 years ago, it was out of necessity, right? There were three of us, right? Two SEOs, one paid media, like that's who you had to work with. But we found a ton of efficiencies in it, in that, there's no chain of command, there's no things passing hands, miscommunication, games of telephone, right?
Right.
The person who's leading the on the ground tactical execution is the one, getting the earful of strategy direct from the client, working on that together, honing how we're going to, hit the ground with this campaign.
Wow. Yeah, that requires accountability on the agency side for sure, because that person has to own it.
Yep.
And regardless of whether they're going to work with somebody in your model or there's like an AE that is getting that information and then passing the baton, there are probably some metrics that a client wants to have from an agency. Bit of a loaded question here, but what do you suggest they think about when they're trying to hammer out what KPIs and things they're going to measure when they're figuring out how they're going to hold that agency accountable?
I think one is to be realistic, right? Like not every tactic is going to yield the same kind of returns or measurable KPIs. I think it's always good. Like we try to, in our kickoff meeting, get to the bottom of that. And I think the closer we can get to where value is truly derived for the end business, that's typically going to be the most agreeable and the best metric to look to increase. And, sometimes it's not always possible. Like think about a lead gen business, right? Like, great, there are more leads, but if those leads aren't of a certain caliber of quality, right, we're not going to be happy with those results. So I think there's also, it gets back to, and this gets outside of, agency influence, because now we're getting into your technical stack and your capabilities of how you can sort this information and feed it back, right? We're in the feedback loops. And while we can help with that, there are just too many, say, CRM systems and, like other integrations for us to really be able to, to master all of them and to, just give the lay of the land on all possible scenarios. So it really is about, I think, coming together and, mutually working toward the best fit solution. And where you have to, like where can we get as close as possible and maybe, select proxy KPIs or things that we know, hey, if we do more of this as a lead measure, we're going to get to where we want to be later down the road.
Right. Yeah, that it's an indicator. I I think the important thing I heard from what you said was that the client has to be honest. And, if they, for example, are asking you guys to bring in leads that are good quality, but let's say they've never cracked that before,
Right.
They need to open their kimono and tell you that. And you're understanding that you're being asked to do something unprecedented, break new ground, and that's fine. Then you can maybe be more experimental and aggressive. But if they instead want you to just replicate a model or scale a model that they've already nailed, then they need to let you know that that's the boundary that you're operating inside of. And right. So, but they're being honest with you. They're not trying to tell you that they're amazing when they really have been falling down.
Yeah, it's not, it's just not going to be helpful to where, they want to actually go. Yeah, that's really interesting. Right. I think you raised a couple really interesting points there. Yeah, because there's so many different ways to attack, say a marketing funnel, right? Like in your scenario where they have it perfected, okay, we need to feed the top of that more, right? Whereas if it's, everyone's falling out of their funnel at the consideration stage, right? That's the hole we need to patch. And that's where we should be focusing our energies strategically, because otherwise it doesn't matter how much we're filling that funnel. We have a huge leak and we're not getting what we need.
Right. And you as the agency also can perhaps spot those things about them. And when they hear it, instead of being defensive, they can probably own up to it, say, yeah, that's right. You revealed a vulnerability. Can you help us with this?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And, I think that's where the best work that I've done has really come from, is when we can truly collaborate, because the client has a whole different context and perspective, and we have, of course, we don't have the same incentive structures on any of this. Right. But we are coming together toward a mutual goal. And the more we can honestly communicate and collaborate, and I think that requires a level of trust and safety, right? And that kind of stuff isn't just built overnight, which is why relationship building and really thinking about that like a relationship, right, and putting effort into it is so important on both sides.
Yeah. Do you think the relationship is getting better or worse over time? Like, you've been at this for a good while.
Yeah, going on 14 years. Yeah, I don't know, right? Like I can cherry pick examples on both sides, right? Like I think
Well, what do you think? What are the hallmarks of where you can just tell maybe in that kickoff meeting, this is probably going to be a good relationship? What are do you look for maybe that day-to-day contact that is really happy to get in and get their hands dirty? Or, do you look for somebody who's maybe more at the really C-level and they've got big vision, but they really don't want to mess with execution?
Yeah, I mean, it can work on both sides, right? Like, I don't think that the personality behind that matters as much, because I think we can point to plenty of examples where we've had a lot of success with that, C-level visionary, because I think he understands, where he wants to go and kind of maps that out and has the 5-year plan, but knows that, he doesn't know the specifics and can give us the freedom to explore, right? And we're going to have to explore to get there. Because while you might be able to see over the vista where we're going, once you get into the weeds, all bets are off. Or on the other side, when you have, someone who really knows our platforms. I'm thinking of one client in particular he worked in agency, right? And that is so helpful, right? Because we can just completely be open and get into the weeds with him and quickly come to a resolution. So yeah, I think a good agency is going to be able to scale with you and have the conversation at the level you need to have. But there are still going to be gaps there, and I think we just have to be open and honest and build that trust and say, hey, we got to go down a few of these roads, and it's not always going to be a winner.
Yeah.
Right. But what do we do? What's our contingency plan? Here's our hypothesis. If that doesn't work, what's next? I think just having a plan, communicating that, and being on the same page with what that looks like goes a long way in both building trust and getting where you want to go.
I couldn't agree more. That whole point of saying we have plan A, but plan B and C are behind it. And both parties are committed to understanding that the knowledge that plan A didn't work is really important to get to because it allows you to figure the direction to go to plan B versus plan A didn't work. My agency stinks, right? It wasn't about whether or not the party that executed the plan was amazing. It was about, did that hypothesis prove true or not, right? And everybody's got to keep their eye on that ball. Yeah, the agency still has to do it properly, but let's assume that it's all about figuring out what comes next.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a bit of luck to it, right? Like some products and services that when they come to market, it's just the right time, right? Yeah. So, you can put together a half-baked marketing campaign and you're going to see killer results. you know, it's funny because, I think it took me a while in my career to really learn that, the best, paid media campaign in the world will not overcome a bad website, will not overcome a bad product.
Yeah, that's right. Everything ties to everything else. Back to the part about how frequently people want to communicate with the agency. Obviously, you do have multiple accounts to run. And yep. I want to talk for a sec about the type of client that says, yeah, it sticks in my craw that they are somewhere else and I can't see them every day. And when they compare that to, let's say, hiring some freelancers, and let's even assume that they can, physically come into an office and sit with the client on a regular basis, how do you think of the contrast between your model of what you're doing as an agency and that lure of having those outside contractors who, are just, they certainly have a deep skill, but they are really just lone guns. So right. What do you think are the differences that really stand out?
Yeah, I mean, I think all these things are great to explore in the right scenario, right? Sometimes, contracted work, someone who's going to be a warm body, right, in your company is going to start to absorb your culture and see things from a different point of view than a lot of your, traditional outsourced agencies is just frankly going to pick up on, right? We can observe all the literature we want, but it's not, you're not going to be breathing the day-to-day culture and understanding what do clients care about when they call? What do customers need, right? You're just not going to have that level of, your finger on the pulse of that kind of stuff. But I mean, you're also talking about, a freelancer. I mean, what's the minimum you can hire them for, right? Like how many days a week, how many hours, et cetera. So I think typically that's going to be way more expensive. Whereas like on the agency model, I think our commitments start at 8-10 hours a month for like a small, pay-per-click account management, or, 35 hours a month for, SEO and content, right? Because that's per month. That's not, right. a lot of time when you break it down versus a full-time employee.
Yes. And you can turn it on basically on and off like a light switch.
Right. Well, and it gives you access to like different team members, right? So like on our SEO team, at minimum, like the smallest SEO account is going to have 3 different specialists, right? One technical specialist, really looking at the site to make sure everything's structurally sound and helping guide, new pages, new content, et cetera, right? Then we have the creative team who's developing content, which is in service to link building, right? And then we have another team that actually goes out there and pitches that to different media outlets to try to build link authority through this, amazing visual content that's telling a unique story. So like right there, all of that for $35 or 35 hours in a month, starts to seem pretty reasonable, because to hire, those specialists as freelancers and to coordinate them, toward this common objective is, I think, going to be really difficult and, not in everyone's wheelhouse to be able to do.
Yeah. And would you say even the amount of exposure that, let's say, the people on your team, that trio, I would have to think that they're going to have a faster velocity of seeing accounts. They're just touching files for a little bit of time each month, but each of them is seeing so many more accounts versus the fractional person who's got 2 days a week here, 2 days a week there. They're going to definitely see stuff, but new trends, for example, I would imagine the team that is seeing a whole bunch of them is going to touch that faster than the person who, really does need to be embedded.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that people think about a lot when choosing a job, right? And I'm talking about people in our industry, right? You go to agency because you want breadth, right? Like I want to see lots of stuff. I want to, learn fast and, get a ton of just different exposure. And there's a lot to be said about that. I mean, I've done it, for a long time now. Or you go in-house and you get the depth.
And you go deep.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you could have a whole separate conversation on that. Huge advantages, I think, on both sides. But yeah, I think people value the agency because we see something or we experiment and it gives us an idea over here. Oh, but guess what? Hey, I think all of our clients might benefit from this kind of strategy, right?
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, there's access to that kind of stuff. Early betas, right? If you have a small spend in something like Google Ads, if you're solo, you're probably going to be the last to know. Whereas, part of an agency, you might get in on an early beta that's perfect for your particular industry. And again, like some of them completely flop, but it's, I think it's still very interesting. And I can think of just, a few stories off the top of my head where, new beta comes out. Oh, that is perfect. And, a small client that otherwise wouldn't have access is, absolutely reaping the rewards.
Cool. You've talked about the people and why they might choose an agency. Let's swivel around to your vantage point as one of the key people in the agency and talk about one big thing that you have to do that a client doesn't have to worry about because you've got it in the agency, and that is you acquiring talent. That has to happen somewhere. So tell me a little bit about what that is like. That's probably something that, keeps you up late into the night working on. But, what is that like inside of an agency? Because like I said, it has to be done whether a person is coming in as a CMO and they're building their own team. An agency owner is kind of like that CMO. What do you have to deal with?
Well, I think it's like one of the worst parts of my job. No, it's very difficult. It's very time consuming. I do like meeting new people. So like that part's great. But yeah, it just, it takes me so far away from my, my day to day of, helping lead the, the organization and, working with clients. We have to hire for such a unique skill set, right? Because of our unique position in agency world where, the end client is working with the end expert. So I think that's provided us a unique challenge in that we need not only a certain level of technical expertise for whatever position we're hiring for, but we also need someone who can present to potential C-level and just has a knack to be a good communicator. Right. And all of a sudden there, when you stack skill A on top of skill B, you are really narrowing your pool of potential candidates, which I think is, which is great. Right. Like, so, yeah, we're able to go out there and do that and then provide that to our clients. And that's, I think that's definitely part of any agency service is making sure, they've collected the right talent to help you meet your objectives.
Yeah. And you have to do the same thing with that talent, which is groom them. Tell me a little bit about what you try to do as far as a career path, because they clearly have choices at any time. They can go in-house if they want. What are the challenges as a head of an agency to try to retain and, groom and develop people?
Yeah, I think part of it's just, being transparent and offering, real paths. I try my best to give people active feedback and, try to relate it back into like a career advancement vision. Right. So if we stumble over here, right, and it's going to happen and right, like we're all going to continue to have stumbles, and that's okay as long as we're learning and adapting, right, and overcoming, so that next time we come to the same hurdle, we're not having that same issue. So yeah, I think it's really about providing some kind of vision of growth, right, and making it clear, like here, what are some of the expectations, And yeah, we can definitely have conversations about, what that next step is. As a small agency, we don't have to have like a super rigid, career path structure, right? I think, we have made room, right, to highlight different people's unique skills.
Right.
And I'd like to continue to do that. Like if there's a need for it and they're excelling, let's put these things together, because I think people are going to be pretty good at the things they like doing.
Yeah. I'm remembering there's a guy, you might have heard of him too. He runs a Chicago agency called PR 2020. His name is Paul Raitzer. And he says something that makes me smile just about the people. He says, you're always one client away or you're one hire away from where your agency needs to be.
Yeah.
Right. So, but what I like about that as well is that's a little bit of a carrot. At least, we're both in paid media agencies. And what I can offer as a carrot to an internal person is, well, if you develop this skill, I do know of a client or a category of clients out there, and it's paid media. So you have to use money, right, the media money, to get in the game. Yeah. So if that person has the skill, I can bring the client, and when we match the two, then they're able to really use their skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So but they have to, for example, get certified on the technology, or show me that they have maybe a model that they've constructed to help explain how this kind of campaign could work. But yeah, I do think that the other side of it is business development, where the agency is looking at those internal hires and trying to say to them, look, there are some juicy projects out there, but you've got to be at a certain level. And if you get to that level, we'll bring that account in.
Yeah,
we'll find an account to keep you engaged.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's such a tough balance to strike, because the reality is we only have so much control over that. All we can do is put ourselves out there for the right, to have the right conversations. But at the end of the day, it's up to the to the clients.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, I want to be respectful of time, but you got to tell me before we go, tell me a little bit more of the story of how you came to be in this role as an agency leader. And, it seems that you got into agencies fairly early. Tell me a little bit about how that happened. How did you find and decide for yourself, whatever you took in school or whatever you really were leaning towards, that, this was the right place for Nathan?
Yeah, so I have a pretty funny story, because I don't think, what I do today was really even an option when I was in college. I studied, I have a dual major in humanities and social sciences, which I affectionately call the unemployable arts, right? It was basically philosophy. And, I thought I was going to go the academic road, right? I was into philosophy, comparative literature, thought about communications for a second. So after I graduated college, I moved down to Chicago, right? And I didn't know what I was going to do next, right? That summer, and I started working at a Starbucks down there, because I used to work at one in high school. And I met this guy, Justin Sanger, who turned out to be the president of Local Launch, a Chicago agency. And one day he said, what are you doing here? We're hiring. Why don't you come work for me? And so, I took the interview. I didn't know what pay-per-click was. I obviously, I knew Google. I had used Google through college to help out with certain things. But
right.
So started working there. It was such a fortunate experience, because it turned out on that team was a guy named Brad Geddes, who I think
wow.
is one of the keynotes at major conferences, and
yes,
wrote the definitive book on PPC. So I look at it as just a super fortunate opportunity that I got to basically study under Brad, who's one of the I think biggest names in this industry. So learned a ton from him. Had an opportunity while at Local Launch. So Local Launch was acquired by R.H. Donnelly.
Okay.
And so corporate kind of takeover. Anyway, we had to start advertising for their decks, Yellow Pages. So I was put on to this huge account. So Brad was doing the strategy and I did all the, like the research and execution and everything from that point. So we did like 200 verticals across 26 state footprints. So it was just an absolutely massive, crazy account, to work on, which was such a great experience because, I was working hand in hand with these, like high level Google and Bing, or back then Microsoft reps and Yahoo reps, to help with, all this execution and considerations and get all this research. So yeah, it was really cool. While there, I became pretty close with George and Taylor, who are the owners of Digital Third Coast. At a certain point, we just kind of saw the writing on the wall with R.H. Donnelly, who was later went bankrupt. And we all left at different times and, kept in good touch with these guys. Taylor lived right in my neighborhood in Chicago. So we would, hang out, and he said, hey, we have this client that wants paid search, can you come on and help us with it? And so that's really where it all started. So yeah, it was, for a while, 3 guys in a basement, just, hustling. And, over time we were kind of forced to mature and get, more and more serious. And, it's been a fun ride.
Wow. And it sounds nothing like the Mad Men story, right? Nothing like the 3 martini lunches and, being in a New York skyscraper, 3 guys in a basement. But I love the realism of it. And it's amazing that when agencies, I guess, got rid of the starch, right? When whatever decade that was, that agencies started to be people who just said, look, we're real. We're like you. We know how to do this stuff, and we're here for hire. I think that's when things got just a lot better, and they got a lot more fragmented because we got honest with clients about how many different roles there are in this.
Right.
But when we got that way and we allowed clients to see a little bit behind the curtain, I think things got a lot better. And, there's more to deal with today than ever. But it's amazing that, when you find the right people and they match those skills to a client need, I think that's a great case for why agencies work. I mean, you seem to be the living embodiment of why it works.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, you nailed the recipe right there. Right. And I think that foundation built on trust, and we didn't talk about it much, but transparency, right? We're always 100% transparent. We want the client to own the account and, be the billing contact, so that there's just no question over, what's happening. The client can look at any point and check in.
I think those are great agency, standards to live by. So listen, I appreciate you being transparent and telling us what it really is like in how somebody can assemble a marketing function with, an agency in the picture. Nathan, how would you, if people wanted to reach out and say hi or ask some questions, where would you send them to?
Sure. They could send me an email at npabich@digitalthirdcoast.net. Happy to talk. All right.
And the agency's site is digitalthirdcoast.com.
It is. We did switch to .com. The .net is an artifact from another time.
That's okay. We'll put them both in the show notes so people have a place to get to for that.
Yeah, perfect.
Hey, Nathan, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, Glenn. It's been great.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.